Recently, Cannondale sponsored mountain biking UK to do a couple of challenges. One of the challenges was to Everest in a day, and I took it upon myself to head out to the Alps to give it a go. In a cycling context, Everesting means that you climb the equivalent height of Mount Everest on one single climb. I'm not a mountain climber, as you can tell, but Google seems to agree that Mount Everest is 8,848 metres high from sea level to its summit. I used to live in the French Alps. I was there for 8 years. I know the mountains really well in one particular ski resort, which is Morzine in the Port du Soleil. So I chose to Everest on the Pleney. Some of you may know the Pleney already. It's quite a big mountain. It's around 550 metres of vertical gain from its base to its summit. And the descent on the Pleney, the one that I chose to ride, was the Black Run. So it's a pretty gnarly run. It's not the most difficult, most technical, narrowest track around. There's not many routes, but it's pretty long, it's pretty fast, and it's full of braking bumps. Here's the bit some of you may not like. I did choose to do this challenge on an e-bike. So I'm not an Olympian, I'm not a major athlete. I do ride quite a bit. I ride kind of 200 miles a week commuting to and from work. Where at work I'm sedentary, sit behind a desk all day, do my emails on my computer. So I enlisted the help of an e-bike. To some of you, this challenge might sound easy, but what you have to remember is to complete the 8,848 metres of climbing, I'm going to have to do it 19 times. So that's 19 full runs of a top level black downhill track. Now that is no mean feat in itself. I wasn't sure personally if I was going to be able to make it. Maybe I didn't. Let's talk about the bikes. Cannondale gave me 2 Motera LT1s for this challenge, just in case one broke. The LT1s kitted out with Fox 36 forks that give 160mm of travel. The rear shock's a Fox factory rear shock with 160mm of travel as well. It's got a Magic Mary on the front and a Hans Dampf tyre on the back, a KS Lev 150mm dropper post, and Shimano XT brakes and drivetrain. So these specs, they basically all mean that the bike was pretty suited to riding these kind of conditions. It's got a pretty long wheelbase, you know, it's not a short bike for the large. The chainstays are quite short at the back, especially for an e-bike, which is something you don't always find, which meant that the balance was nice on the bike when riding it. It didn't feel like it was too difficult to pull up. The 66-degree head angle, pretty slack. It's not groundbreaking, but it's fine. The Motera is equipped with a Bosch motor that comes standard with a 500-watt battery. Luckily for me, Bosch supplied me with 7 batteries. Some of them are 500 watts, some of them 400 watts to do the challenge. To get all this climbing done, I was going to have to put the batteries on charge whilst I was still doing the ride. On the day of the challenge, I woke up nice and early, took the bike to the bottom of the Pleney, got it out of the van, and lo and behold, the heavens opened. It was absolutely lashing it down with rain. Just like any one of these things was ever going to be. It was never going to be sunny, hot, amazing weather straight away. It never is. It's not possible. It's a challenge.
So I'm at the bottom of the Pleney now. We haven't started just yet. It's 7:30. A little bit nervous about the day ahead. I guess it's going to be quite a big one, I suppose. It's just started raining. I reckon it's going to be pretty sloppy. I just put my waterproofs in the bag, and yeah. Woo.
So, started heading up the first bit of the Pleney. Much to my embarrassment, there's a small incline at the start that was on grass. Slipped and crashed. The first hurdle, fell over on it.
Hang on, wheel spin!
Climbing up the first lap, I was feeling quite fresh, if not a little tired, because I didn't sleep very well, quite anxious about the whole thing. Pedalling along, nice and happy, the bike was in turbo mode, everything was going pretty well after the first crash. Even though the trail was, you know, quite steep, it was quite slippy because it had rained all night. You had to have quite a lot of bike control to keep the front wheel down and to stop yourself from slipping out. At the top, I worked out what my routine was and what I needed to do next for the descent. Put my chin guard on my helmet, put my goggles on, and threw my waterproofs on because the trail was pretty soggy. The track was quite greasy, it was quite sloppy, which meant that my goggles got quite muddy quite quickly, despite having a front mud guard. And also, luckily, because I put my waterproofs on, my riding kit underneath wasn't muddy, but the waterproofs were absolutely caked. As the day progressed and I got deeper into the challenge, it kind of dawned on me what I was actually doing and the task that I'd taken upon myself to do.
I'm halfway into the Everest in a Day challenge, currently done 77.45 kilometres. It's taken me 4 hours 22 minutes. Feeling pretty tired now. Track's dried out loads since this morning. Now that it's got dry, it's a lot harsher, it's a lot bumpier. I was going to keep eating Cliff Bars and keep eating little energy chews, and fingers crossed it goes all right.
Riding up on your own, all you've got is the electric battery whirring away. So, you end up talking to yourself a little bit, you end up trying to entertain yourself, you're asking yourself questions, can I do this next bit quicker? With the heart rate monitor and GPS on the handlebar, you could always keep track of exactly how far you were. And I found that my legs didn't get hugely tired on the way up. I kept my heart rate reasonably low, kept myself quite composed, quite calm. I think my heart rate maxed out at like 155 beats a minute or 156 beats a minute on the climbs, and that was on the 2 steep sections of climb. So one steep section was through a grassy field. The next section's dead steep, it goes straight up a ski piste. In the winter, it's a blue graded ski piste. In the summer, it feels like an absolute epic mountain to ride up. There's loads of like big loose rocks on the fire road, it's proper gnarly, real slippy. At the beginning of the ride, when it was kind of a bit wetter, the fire road was okay, there was quite a bit of traction. But as the day went on, it dried out, the sun came out, everything was drying perfectly, which was great for the downhills. But on the way up, it meant that traction was an issue, and you had to be quite focused and you had to keep the power down constantly. Always pedalling, making sure you always pedal, because as soon as you stop pedaling on an e-bike, the power assist goes away. And then you're lumbered with a 30 kilo weight that you have to get going again. But as you're probably identifying rightly by now, the climb wasn't the most arduous thing of this challenge. It was the descent. It's pretty brutal. There's like braking bumps everywhere, you're having to control your speed, there's a lot of braking, there's a lot of fast sections, and there are some smaller nadrary sections, but not too many. I'm pretty used to riding the Pleney on a downhill bike, but on an e-bike it's a whole different beast. You have to be really conscious of the additional weight of the bike. You have to brake earlier, you have to be more prepared for the jumps, and you have to be ready to absorb any kind of big compressions with your body as much as the bike. For example, there's one section on the track that's kind of around a really long right-hand corner that's littered with braking bumps, and then there's a really sharp, steep kicker at the end of it. Coming around that turn, you're going flat out, you're going Mach 10. You really don't want to be touching the brakes because of all the braking bumps. That would interfere with the suspension and the bike's ability to absorb all of those holes. But suddenly, you're confronted with having to hold on and really control the bike in the air. You really need to use your weight to manhandle the bike's additional weight. On the flip side, and luckily for me, because the bike has a really large sprung versus unsprung mass, it makes the suspension work exceptionally well on all the braking bumps. The swing arm's really light, the main frame is really heavy, and because the swing arm's light, it doesn't interfere with the main frame when the suspension moves. There's no kind of movement, there's no input from the rear of the bike causing the front of the bike to get settled. So hitting all these braking bumps at 1,000,000 miles an hour, all you have to do basically is grow big balls and not touch the brakes.
That was pretty ridiculous.
I need to check you were still alive or had been struck by lightning.
Coming in towards the end of the day, I was getting pretty knackered. Like it was a lot of riding. I think I'd maybe done 15 or 16 runs by this point, and the weather was looking a little bit more threatening than it had done throughout the middle of the day when it had really dried out. Just as I got to the top of the run, the heavens opened, and my God, it was a biblical storm. I took cover inside the top Pleney lift station and decided to wait it out for the storm to pass, which turned out to be a really great idea. The storm lasted for kind of 30 to 45 minutes, and what was obviously going to happen? Well, the tracks were going to get wet, weren't they? And my God, they were wet. They just turned into a complete river.
That was pretty ridiculous. Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Keep going.
Yeah, I've got 2 more to do. So.
At this point, I had 2 descents left. So it was kind of like, well, I can't stop now. I've come this far, I'm not just going to quit. What's the point? You might as well just not do anything at all. The last couple of laps were, it felt quite good, but because of all the rain and this storm, I was basically just surviving. I was sandbagging my way down. I couldn't see anything on the track, and I was kind of really just looking forward to finishing it. Coming into the grand finale, where I was expecting a huge welcoming crowd and loads of food and a big platter served up for me, it wasn't quite like that. There was the videographer, Joe, there was a photographer, Andy, and Ben Winder, a good friend, had made his way just to welcome me into the finish line. which was fine because, you know, all I was looking forward to was having a shower, getting changed and getting a good bite to eat. For the stats fans out there, I wrote a couple of them down. Here they are. I did 9,345 metres of climbing, 162.22 kilometres of riding, average speed of 17.4 kilometres an hour, max speed was 60.1 kilometres an hour. It took 8 hours and 23 minutes of moving time, which equated to 19 runs on the Pleney. My fastest descent was 5 minutes 39 seconds, with an average heart rate of 130 beats a minute over the 8 hours. I had 2 punctures. I used 1 can of oil, 1 pot of chamois lubricant, 9 Cliff Bars, and did 10 batteries. So overall, looking back, what was it like? Well, it was pretty tough, to be honest with you. The hardest thing was definitely the descent. Doing 19 of those was not easy. The climbs weren't easy either though, you know, I'm not saying they are. They were pretty tough, you know, it wasn't a rest, it wasn't a walk in the park. Maybe mentally it was quite tough, just being on your own for that much time, riding your bike for 8.5 hours. You know, that's a lot of riding time, even if you're on an e-bike. Obviously, and it goes without saying, this isn't going to be recognised as an official Everest challenge by the Hells 500. You know, I was on an e-bike, it is mechanical doping. But it has sown a seed in my mind, and next year there's a possibility I might be back to try it on a bike without a motor.